The morning Emma Harris died in childbirth was the morning her daughter Helen learned that love could break a person into pieces so small they might never be whole again. Helen was 20 years old that gray February day in 1877, standing in the doorway of their small ranch house outside Columbia, California, watching her father cradle her newborn brother while tears streamed silently down his weathered face. 3 days later, her father put a bullet through his own head in the barn, and Helen became an orphan with an infant to raise and a failing cattle ranch she had no idea how to run. The banker in Columbia gave her 6 months before foreclosure. The neighboring ranchers offered to buy her out for pennies on the dollar, their eyes cold with calculation rather than sympathy. Helen sold everything that was not nailed down, every piece of her mother's jewelry, every spare saddle, every tool they could live without. She learned to birth calves with her own hands, to mend fence posts until her palms bled, to shoot rattlesnakes before they spooked the cattle. Her brother Thomas grew from infant to toddler in those hard years, and somehow, through sheer stubborn will and countless sleepless nights, Helen kept the ranch alive. By the spring of 1881, when Helen was 24, the ranch was still standing, but her spirit was wearing thin as old muslin. She had not worn a dress in 3 years, only her father's old work clothes cinched tight with rope. Her hands were calloused, her face sun-darkened, her hair kept in a severe braid she never bothered to fix properly. She looked in the mirror once a month at most, and when she did, she saw a stranger staring back with her mother's hazel eyes but none of her mother's softness. The day Jacob Turner rode into her life, Helen was wrestling with a fence post that had rotted through, swearing with language that would have made a saloon keeper blush. She did not hear his horse approach until he cleared his throat, and she spun around with the fence post raised like a weapon, ready to brain whoever had snuck up on her property. "Easy now," the cowboy said, raising both hands in surrender. He sat astride a paint horse, and even from 10 feet away, Helen could see he was different from the ranch hands who drifted through Columbia looking for work. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty trail clothes and had a bedroll tied behind his saddle, marking him as a drifter. "Did not mean to startle you, miss." "This is private property," Helen said, not lowering the post. "If you are looking for the road to town, you passed it about a mile back. Actually, I heard in Columbia you might be looking for a hand." His voice was deep and steady, with an accent that spoke of Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "Name is Jacob Turner. I am good with cattle, better with horses, and I can mend anything that needs mending." Helen looked him over with a practiced eye. She had hired and fired a dozen ranch hands in 4 years, most of them lazy or drunk or both, a few of them decent workers who moved on when better opportunities came along. This man did not have the look of a drunk, but drifters were always trouble in one way or another. "I cannot pay much." "I am not asking for much. 3 meals, a place to sleep, and whatever you think the work is worth at the end of the month. No drinking on the property, no gambling. You work from sunup to sundown, and if I catch you stealing, I will shoot you myself." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, madam." Something about that smile irritated her, the way it suggested he found her amusing rather than threatening. "You can sleep in the barn. Breakfast is at 5. If you are not at the table, you do not eat." She turned back to the fence post, dismissing him. She heard him dismount, heard his boots on the hard, packed earth as he walked closer. "That post is rotted through the center," he said. "You will never get it to hold. Need to pull it out complete and sink a new one." "I know that," Helen snapped. "I do not have a new one. So I am making this one work." I saw a stand of pine about half a mile east. Could cut a new post before dark if you have an axe." Helen straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She was tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep never seemed to fix. "Fine. Axe is in the barn. You can start today, but you do not get paid until you have been here a full month. Too many men take a week's pay and disappear in the night." "Fair enough." He tipped his hat to her, and she noticed it was a good hat, well made, not the cheap type most drifters wore. That made her suspicious. Men with good hats usually had something to run from. Helen watched him lead his horse toward the barn, noting the easy way he moved, the gentle hand he kept on the horse's neck. Her brother Thomas, now 4 years old, came running from the house, his bare feet kicking up dust. Helen, who is that man?" "A new ranch hand. His name is Mr. Turner, and you are to stay out of his way." "Is he going to leave like the others?" The question pierced her more than it should have. Thomas had watched too many people walk away in his short life. "I do not know, honey. Maybe." That evening, Jacob Turner cut and sunk a new fence post in half the time it would have taken Helen to do it alone. He worked through dinner without complaint, and when he finally came to the house well after dark, Helen had left a plate of cold beans and cornbread on the porch. She watched from the window as he sat on the steps to eat, his movements slow with exhaustion. When he was done, he washed his plate at the pump and left it neatly on the porch rail before heading to the barn. The next morning, Helen woke before dawn as always and went to start breakfast. She opened the door to fetch water and nearly tripped over something on the porch. In the pale pre-dawn light, she saw a small bundle of wildflowers tied with a piece of grass stem, laid carefully on the weathered wood. She picked them up, frowning. They were nothing fancy, just the common flowers that grew wild in the California foothills in spring. Indian paintbrush, lupine, a few California poppies. But someone had taken the time to gather them, to arrange them, to tie them together. Jacob Turner was already up. She could see lamplight in the barn. She walked across the yard with the flowers in her hand, still in her nightgown with a shawl thrown over her shoulders. He was feeding his horse when she entered the barn. He looked up, and if he was surprised to see her in her nightclothes, he did not show it. "Did you leave these?" She held up the flowers. "Yes, madam." "Why?" He met her eyes, and there was something honest and open in his face that made her breath catch. "To see you smile." Helen stared at him. She could not remember the last time someone had done something kind for her with no expectation of return. Could not remember the last time someone had cared whether she smiled or not. The flowers trembled in her hand. "That is foolish," she said, her voice rougher than she intended. "I do not need flowers. I need a working fence line and the south pasture cleared." "I will have the south pasture cleared by end of week," he said calmly. "But that does not mean you do not need flowers too." She wanted to argue with him, to tell him she was not some delicate town girl who needed courting, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned and walked back to the house, the flowers still clutched in her hand. She put them in a chipped ceramic cup with water and set them on the kitchen table. All through breakfast, as Thomas chattered about nothing and everything, her eyes kept drifting to those simple wildflowers. The next morning there were more flowers on the porch. Desert marigolds and blue dicks, arranged with the same simple care. Helen picked them up and went straight to the barn. Jacob was mending a bridle, his fingers working the leather with practiced skill. He looked up when she entered. "You cannot keep doing this," Helen said. "Why not?" "Because I said so. Because it is a waste of time. Because I do not need flowers." "Maybe I think you do." "You do not know anything about what I need. You have been here 2 days." He set down the bridle and stood, and she was suddenly aware of how much taller he was, how broad his shoulders were in the morning light slanting through the barn door. But he did not move toward her, just stood there with that same calm expression. "You are right," he said. "I do not know you. But I know you have been running this ranch alone for years. I know you work yourself to exhaustion every single day. I know you have not smiled once since I got here, and I would bet money you have not smiled in a long time before that. So maybe you are right and you do not need flowers. But maybe you deserve them anyway." No one had talked to her like that in 4 years. No one had seen her as anything other than a hard woman running a failing ranch. Helen felt something crack open in her chest, something she had kept locked away since the day her father died. "I do not have time for this," she whispered and fled back to the house. But she put the new flowers in water with the others. The flowers kept coming. Every morning, without fail, there was a new bundle on her porch. Jacob never mentioned them, never asked if she liked them or what she did with them. He just worked from sunup to sundown, fixing everything that was broken on the ranch, which was nearly everything. He mended the barn roof where it leaked, repaired the chicken coop where coyotes had been getting in, cleared brush from the south pasture like he had promised. He was quiet, competent, and he never complained. Thomas followed him around like a puppy whenever Helen allowed it, and she watched from a distance as Jacob taught her brother how to curry a horse properly, how to coil a rope, how to whittle small animals from scrap wood. He was patient with the boy in a way that made Helen's throat tight. 2 weeks after Jacob arrived, Helen was working in the vegetable garden behind the house when she heard Thomas scream. She dropped her hoe and ran, her heart hammering, certain he had been bitten by a snake or kicked by a horse or any of the 1,000 terrible things that could happen on a ranch. She found Thomas standing frozen near the barn, staring at a rattlesnake coiled 3 feet away, its tail buzzing a deadly warning. Jacob was moving toward them slowly, so slowly, a shovel in his hands. "Thomas," Helen called, keeping her voice level though panic clawed at her throat. "Do not move, baby. Stay very still." The boy whimpered but obeyed. The snake's head tracked back and forth between the 2 humans, trying to decide which was the bigger threat. Jacob was closer now, just a few feet away, positioning himself between Thomas and the snake. "When I move," Jacob said quietly, "you run to your sister fast as you can. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Thomas whispered. Jacob moved with sudden violence, the shovel coming down on the snake's head in one clean strike. "Now, Thomas." The boy bolted and Helen caught him, gathering him into her arms as he burst into tears against her shoulder. Behind them, Jacob made sure the snake was dead before using the shovel to fling it far into the scrub grass. "You are all right," Helen murmured into Thomas's hair. "You are safe." "You are all right." Jacob walked over, breathing hard. "He is fine, just scared." Helen looked up at him, still holding her brother. "Thank you if you had not been here, but I was here." He crouched down to Thomas's level. "Hey, partner, that was real brave staying still like that." A lot of grown men would have panicked. Thomas sniffled, wiping his nose on Helen's shoulder. "I was scared. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway." Jacob reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "You did good." That night, after Thomas was asleep, Helen went out to the barn. Jacob was brushing down his horse, the lamplight casting long shadows across the stall. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said from the doorway. "For today, Thomas is all I have left of my family." Jacob kept brushing the horse, long, steady strokes. "You do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She stepped into the barn, wrapping her arms around herself. "I have not been fair to you. I have been cold and suspicious since the day you arrived. You have reason to be. You do not know me from Adam. I know you have worked harder than any man I have hired in 4 years. I know you are good to my brother. I know you." She hesitated. I know you leave me flowers every morning." He finally stopped brushing and turned to look at her. In the lamplight, his eyes were darker, harder to read. "Does that bother you? It confuses me. Men do not do things for nothing. So what do you want, Jacob Turner? What is the price of those flowers?" He flinched, and she knew she had hurt him. "There is no price, Helen. Can you not just accept that someone might do something kind for you because they want to?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his voice did something strange to her heartbeat. "In my experience, everyone wants something." "Then your experience has been with the wrong people." He set down the brush and walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. "I do not want anything from you except to work on this ranch and maybe, to see you smile every once in a while. That is all. No price, no bargain, just flowers." Helen felt tears prick her eyes and fought them back. She did not cry. She had not cried since the day they buried her father, had not allowed herself that weakness. "I do not know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. Let someone be kind to me, trust someone. I have been alone so long, I have forgotten how." Jacob took a step closer, close enough now that she could smell the honest scent of hay and leather and hard work. "You have not been alone. You have been surviving. But there is a difference between surviving and living, Helen. I do not have time to live. I have a ranch to run and a child to raise, and I cannot afford to." "To what? To be happy, to let someone help you." His voice was gentle but firm. "You are running yourself into the ground, and for what? So you can say you did it all alone. So you can prove you do not need anyone." "I do not need anyone." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. "Maybe not. But maybe you want someone anyway. Maybe that is all right too." He was close enough to touch now, and Helen found herself swaying toward him before she caught herself. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of thing she could not afford. Men left. Men died. Men broke your heart and left you alone to pick up the pieces. "I should go," she whispered. "Helen." He said her name like a prayer. "I am not going anywhere. I will be here tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, for as long as you will have me." "You cannot promise that. No one can promise that." "You are right. I cannot promise I will not get thrown from a horse or bit by a snake or shot by a drunk in town. But I can promise I will not leave by choice. I can promise that every morning I am breathing, there will be flowers on your porch. And I can promise that I am falling in love with you a little more every day, and there is not a damn thing I can do about it." The words hit her like a physical blow. She had been proposed to before, after her father died, by ranchers who wanted her land and saw a convenient widow in waiting. But no one had ever said they loved her. No one had ever looked at her the way Jacob was looking at her now, like she was something precious and rare. "You do not love me," she said, but her voice shook. "You do not even know me. I know you get up before dawn every day and work until you can barely stand. I know you tuck your brother in every night and check on him twice before you go to bed yourself. I know you sing sometimes when you are working in the garden, when you think no one can hear. I know you are the strongest person I have ever met, and the loneliest. And I know I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be that lonely again." A tear slipped down Helen's cheek before she could stop it, then another. "I do not know how to do this. Then we will figure it out together." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. His hand was rough and calloused, but his touch was unbearably gentle. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking you to let me stay. Let me help you. Let me bring you flowers. Let me try to make you smile." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why me? I am not beautiful anymore. I am not soft or sweet or any of the things men want. You are wrong about that." His other hand came up to cup her face, and she let herself lean into that touch like a plant turning toward sunlight. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." And you are strong and brave and stubborn as a mule, and those are exactly the things I want. I am afraid, she whispered. I know, me too. What are you afraid of? That you will never let me close enough to love you properly. That I will wake up one morning and you will have sent me away because it is easier than letting yourself feel something. He knew her. Somehow, in 2 weeks, he had seen straight through every wall she had built. I do not know if I remember how to feel things. I have been numb for so long. Then let me remind you. He leaned down slowly, his eyes on hers, giving her every chance to pull away. But she did not pull away. She let him kiss her, soft and sweet, his lips warm against hers. It was like waking up after a long, dark sleep. Sensation flooded through her, sharp and almost painful in its intensity. She gasped against his mouth, and he gentled the kiss, one hand sliding to the back of her neck to cradle her head. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Helen touched her lips, feeling the tingle where his had been. Oh, a slow smile spread across his face, and it transformed him, made him beautiful. Yeah, oh, I do not know what happens now. Now you go back to the house and get some sleep. And tomorrow morning there will be flowers on your porch, same as always, and we will take it one day at a time. Just like that, just like that. Helen wanted to argue, wanted to find reasons why this was a bad idea, but she was suddenly too tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being alone, tired of pretending she did not need anyone. All right, one day at a time. She walked back to the house on shaking legs, and when she turned to close the door, Jacob was standing in the barn doorway watching her. He raised his hand in a small wave, and before she could stop herself, she smiled. A real smile, the first one in so long she had forgotten how it felt. His answering grin was bright enough to light up the darkness between them. The next morning there were flowers on her porch. Wild roses this time, delicate pink blooms that smelled like summer. Helen buried her face in them and let herself smile again. Over the next few weeks, something shifted between them. Jacob still worked dawn to dusk, but now Helen worked beside him more often, teaching him the particular quirks of her land and cattle. They talked while they worked, simple conversations at first. Where he had grown up, a small ranch in Texas. How he had lost his parents to fever when he was 16. The years he had spent drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long because nowhere felt like home. What made you stop here? Helen asked one afternoon. They were checking the cattle in the north pasture, riding side by side under the warm spring sun. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I saw you in town before I came out to the ranch. You were buying supplies, arguing with the storekeeper over a price. You had dirt on your face and you were wearing men's clothes, and you looked like you were ready to fight the whole world by yourself. And I thought, there is a woman who needs someone on her side. So you rode out here to rescue me. Helen kept her tone light, but there was an edge to it. I do not need rescuing. I know that. You have been rescuing yourself for years. That does not mean you have to keep doing it alone. And what if I send you away tomorrow? What if I decide this is all too complicated? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his expression was serious. Then I would go. But I would wait in town for a week, just in case you changed your mind, and I would think about you every day for the rest of my life. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. You should not say things like that. Why not? It is the truth. They rode in silence for a while, checking the cattle, making sure none had gotten tangled in brush or injured. It was good land, despite everything, and the herd was small but healthy. If Helen could just keep things going for another few years, build up her stock, she might actually make a real living from this place. I am scared, she admitted finally. Every man I have ever loved has left me. My father, the ranch hands I started to trust, even the men in town who used to tip their hats to me before they decided I was too hard to be worth their time. What if you are just another person who will leave? I cannot give you guarantees about the future, Jacob said. Life does not work that way. But I can tell you that I have spent 10 years looking for a place to belong, and I have never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came here. To this ranch, to you. We barely know each other. Then let us fix that. He pulled his horse to a stop and she stopped beside him. Ask me anything, anything you want to know. Helen thought about it. Have you ever been married? No. Ever been in love? He was quiet for a moment. I thought I was once, when I was 18. But she married someone with more money and better prospects, and I realized what I felt was not really love, more like an idea of love. What is real love, then? Jacob looked out over the pasture, at the cattle grazing peacefully under the wide California sky. Real love is this: sitting on a horse next to someone and feeling like you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Real love is wanting to know how someone's day was, what they are thinking, what makes them happy. It is not about grand gestures. It is about showing up every day and meaning it. Helen felt her throat tighten. The flowers are not a grand gesture. The flowers are me showing up, telling you without words that I see you, that you matter, that you deserve beauty in your life even when everything is hard. I do not deserve you, she whispered. Yes, you do. You deserve someone who will work beside you, who will help carry the weight. You deserve someone who knows how strong you are and loves you for it instead of being threatened by it. Before she could second-guess herself, Helen reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and certain. I think I might be falling in love with you too, she said, and it terrifies me. Good, he grinned at her. We can be terrified together. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and when they dismounted, Jacob pulled her close and kissed her again, longer and deeper this time. Helen let herself melt into it, let herself feel the solid warmth of his body against hers, the way his hands spanned her waist like he never wanted to let go. Stay for dinner tonight, she said when they broke apart. In the house, I mean, not just eating on the porch. You sure? I am not sure about anything, but I want you there anyway. That night, they ate together at the small kitchen table, Thomas chattering excitedly about his day and the rabbit he had seen near the creek. Jacob listened with genuine interest, asking questions, making the boy laugh. Helen watched them and felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt dangerously like happiness. After Thomas was asleep, Jacob lingered by the door, hat in his hands. I should go. You could stay a little longer if you wanted. So he stayed, and they sat on the porch in the warm darkness, talking about everything and nothing. Their dreams, their regrets, the lives they had imagined for themselves when they were young. Jacob told her about the ranch he had always wanted to own, a place of his own where he could build something lasting. Helen told him about the girl she used to be before her parents died, when she had dreamed of pretty dresses and trips to San Francisco and maybe, someday, falling in love with someone who looked at her like she hung the moon. You could still have those things, Jacob said. The dresses, the trips, the love. I do not need dresses or trips, but the love. She turned to look at him. Maybe the love. He kissed her again, soft and slow, and Helen felt herself surrendering to it, to him, to the terrifying possibility of letting someone in after so many years alone. Spring turned to summer, and Jacob stayed. He proved himself not just as a ranch hand but as a partner, someone who understood the land and the work and the endless challenges of keeping a small ranch alive. He brought in 2 new cattle he had bought with his own wages, refusing to let Helen pay him back. He taught Thomas to ride properly, patiently correcting the boy's seat and grip, until he could canter around the corral without fear. And every single morning, without fail, there were flowers on the porch. Helen had jars of them throughout the house now, wildflowers in every stage of bloom. She had never been one for decoration, but she found herself looking forward to those flowers, to the reminder that someone thought about her first thing every morning, that someone cared whether she smiled, and she was smiling more. Thomas noticed it first, commenting one morning that Helen looked prettier when she was happy. Jacob noticed too, and every time she smiled at him, he looked at her like she had given him the greatest gift in the world. But happiness, Helen was learning, was a fragile thing in the West. In late July, when the heat was pressing down like a wool blanket and the creeks were running low, a group of men rode onto her property just after dawn. Helen was feeding the chickens when she heard the horses, and her stomach dropped. She knew these men. Walt Jameson, who owned the largest ranch in the county, and 3 of his hands. Jacob emerged from the barn, and Helen saw him clock the situation immediately, saw his body go tense and alert. He walked over to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Mr. Jameson," Helen said, keeping her voice level. "What can I do for you?" Jameson was a thick man in his 50s, with a face like old leather and eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit. "Miss Harris, I heard you took on a new hand." His gaze swept over Jacob dismissively. "I am here with a final offer for your land, $500, cash money, more than fair for what you have got here. I told you last year and the year before that my land is not for sale. That was before the drought." Jameson gestured at the dry hills. "You cannot run cattle with no water. Your creek will be dry by September. What are you going to do then?" "The same thing I have done for the last 4 years. Survive. You are being foolish. That is the best offer you will get. Take it and move to town. Find yourself a husband who can actually provide for you." Helen felt Jacob tense beside her, but he stayed silent. This was her fight, and he knew it. "I have all the provisions I need right here," Helen said. "Now, if that is all, I have work to do." "There is one more thing." Jameson leaned forward in his saddle, and his voice dropped to something colder. "Some of my cattle have gone missing. Thought you might know something about that." The accusation hung in the air like a gunshot. Helen felt ice slide down her spine. "Are you calling me a rustler?" "I am saying cattle have gone missing, and you are awful close to my property line." "I have not touched your cattle. I barely have the resources to manage my own herd." "What about your new hand here? Maybe he has been supplementing his wages with my stock." Jacob finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "I have never stolen anything in my life, and I am not about to start with cattle. If you are missing stock, look to your own men or the drifters who come through. But you will not lay that blame on me or Miss Harris." One of Jameson's hands put his hand on his gun, and everything went very still. Helen stepped forward, putting herself slightly in front of Jacob. "There will be no trouble on my land. Mr. Jameson, you have made your offer and I have declined. Now I am asking you politely to leave." Jameson stared at her for a long moment, and Helen could see him weighing his options. Finally, he straightened in his saddle. "You are making a mistake. When this ranch fails and you are left with nothing, do not come begging for a better price." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Helen did not move until they were out of sight, and then her legs went weak. Jacob caught her elbow. "You all right? He is not going to let this go. If he is losing cattle, he will find a way to blame me for it, use it as an excuse to take my land. Then we make sure we have proof that our cattle are ours. We will brand every head in the next week, make sure they are all accounted for. And I will ride the property line every day, make sure none of his stock wanders onto our land. This is not your fight, Jacob." He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Yes, it is. Your fights are my fights now. That is what this is, Helen. That is what I am trying to tell you." She looked up at him, at the fierce determination in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This was real. He was real. He was not going anywhere. "I love you," she said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. His face transformed, and he pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest. "I love you too. God, Helen, I love you so much it scares me sometimes." She buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the scent of him, letting herself feel safe for the first time in years. "What are we going to do? We are going to protect this ranch. We are going to brand every cow we own, and we are going to make sure Walt Jameson knows we are not going anywhere." They spent the next week working harder than ever, rounding up their small herd and branding each animal with Helen's mark, a simple H that her father had registered years ago. It was brutal work in the summer heat, and by the end of each day, they were both exhausted and filthy. But they did it together, and somehow that made it bearable. Thomas helped where he could, bringing water and keeping count. Jacob taught him how to read the brands, how to spot which cattle were theirs and which might have wandered from neighboring ranches. The boy absorbed it all eagerly, proud to be part of the work. On the last day of branding, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Jacob and Helen stood by the corral watching the cattle settle for the night. "That is all of them," Jacob said. 43 head. "Not a huge herd, but it is honest and it is yours." "Ours," Helen corrected. "If you are staying, if this is real, then it is ours." He looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Is that what you want, for me to stay permanently?" "Yes." The word came easily now. "I want you to stay. I want to build this ranch with you. I want to go to sleep every night knowing you will be here in the morning. I want—" She hesitated. "I want a life with you, Jacob, if you will have me." "If I will have you," he laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. "Helen Harris, I would be honored to spend my life with you, but I do not want to just be your ranch hand or your business partner. I want to marry you. I want to make this official." Helen's heart stuttered. "Are you proposing to me while we are covered in dust and cow dung? Is there a better time? This is our life. This ranch, this work, this dirt. I do not want to pretty it up or pretend it is something it is not. I love you exactly as you are right here, right now. So yes, I am proposing while we are covered in dust and cow dung. Will you marry me?" She wanted to say yes immediately, but old fears held her back. "What about Jameson? What if he causes trouble? What if you end up regretting tying yourself to me and this failing ranch?" "This ranch is not failing. Not anymore. And Walt Jameson is one man. We will deal with him together." Jacob took her hands, not caring that they were both filthy. "I am not your father or the men who left you. I am not going to disappear. I am not going to give up when things get hard. I am here and I am staying whether you marry me or not, but I would really like to marry you." Helen felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were good tears, happy tears. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He whooped and picked her up, spinning her around right there in the dust. She laughed, really laughed, the sound strange and wonderful in her own ears. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and she kissed him back with 4 years of loneliness and longing and love all poured into that single moment. Thomas came running from the house. "What happened? Why are you laughing?" Helen crouched down to his level. "Jacob and I are getting married. He is going to be part of our family." The boy's face lit up. "Really? You are going to stay forever, forever," Jacob promised, ruffling his hair. "You are stuck with me now, partner." Thomas launched himself at Jacob, who caught him easily and lifted him up. The boy wrapped his arms around Jacob's neck, and Helen watched them with her heart so full she thought it might burst. They were married 3 weeks later in Colombia. in a simple ceremony at the small church with just Thomas and the preacher present. Helen wore the one good dress she owned, a faded blue calico that had been her mother's. Jacob wore his best shirt and pants, his hat held nervously in his hands. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other until death, Jacob's voice was strong and certain, and Helen's barely shook at all. Afterward, they went to the general store and bought candy for Thomas and supplies for the ranch. The storekeeper congratulated them, and so did several of the townspeople they passed. Helen had been something of a pariah for years, the strange woman rancher who dressed like a man and ran her own affairs. But walking down the street with Jacob's ring on her finger and his hand in hers, she felt like she belonged for the first time since her father died. That night, Jacob moved his belongings from the barn to the house, to the bedroom that had been Helen's alone for so long. She was nervous, standing in the doorway watching him hang his clothes on pegs beside hers. "You all right?" he asked, noticing her hesitation. "I have not shared a bed with anyone since I was a child and would crawl in with my mother during storms." He walked over to her, taking her hands gently. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We can just sleep." "I want to," she said quickly. "I am just nervous. I do not really know what I am doing." "Neither do I." At her look of surprise, he smiled. "I told you I have never been married. And I was not the type to visit saloon girls. So we will figure this out together, same as everything else." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Helen let herself relax into it. They took their time, learning each other in the lamplight, gentle and careful and tender. When they finally lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Helen felt a peace she had not known existed. This was what love was supposed to be. Not grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but this quiet certainty, this sense of coming home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for the flowers, for making me smile, for reminding me that I could be happy." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Helen woke before dawn as always, there were flowers on the nightstand beside her. Jacob must have gotten up even earlier to put them there, then come back to bed. She smiled and kissed his shoulder, and he stirred, pulling her closer. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. They worked the ranch as a team, and with two sets of hands, things that had seemed impossible became merely difficult. Jacob proved himself an excellent cattleman, and under his guidance, their small herd began to grow. He bought breeding stock with his savings, and by the fall, they had 50 head of cattle, the most Helen had owned since her father's death. Thomas thrived with Jacob's attention and guidance. The boy who had been growing up too fast, taking on responsibilities no child should have to bear, started acting like a child again. He played and laughed and caused mischief, secure in the knowledge that the adults in his life were not going anywhere. The flowers continued every morning. Sometimes they were elaborate arrangements, other times just a single bloom. Helen never asked where Jacob found the time to gather them, but she treasured every single one. They were a promise kept, a daily reminder that she was loved and valued. But the situation with Walt Jameson was not resolved. Throughout the fall, they found signs that someone was watching the ranch. Tracks that were not theirs, fence lines that had been tampered with, small signs of trespass. Jacob took to sleeping lightly, his rifle always within reach. In October, the trouble came to a head. Helen was in town buying supplies when she overheard two of Jameson's hands talking in the saloon. They did not see her outside the window, did not realize their voices carried. "Boss says we move in tonight. Make sure some of our cattle end up on the Harris property, then we go in tomorrow with the sheriff. Catch them red-handed." You sure this is legal? Who cares? Harris is just a woman, and that husband of hers is a nobody. Jameson wants the land, and he is going to get it. Helen's blood turned to ice. She ran for her wagon, drove home faster than was safe, and burst into the house wild-eyed. Jacob was at the table, going over ranch accounts, and he jumped up when he saw her face. What happened? She told him everything she had overheard. Jacob's jaw tightened, and he stood, already moving toward the gun cabinet. We need to be ready. If they try to drive cattle onto our land tonight, we need to catch them in the act. We need proof of what they are doing. We cannot fight all of Jameson's men. He has a dozen hands at least. We do not need to fight them. We just need to document what they are doing and get the real law involved. Not the sheriff that Jameson has in his pocket, but someone with actual authority. Who? There is a U.S. Marshal who comes through Columbia every few months. Last I heard, he was due back next week. If we can hold out until then, we can report what is happening. But first, we need proof. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jacob rode to their closest neighbor, a decent man named Sam Pritchard who had always been fair to Helen, and explained the situation. Sam agreed to come over that night as a witness to whatever happened. They positioned themselves around the property after dark, hidden but watchful. Around midnight, they heard the cattle coming, at least a dozen head, driven deliberately toward the Harris property line. Jacob had positioned Helen safely behind a boulder with a rifle, while he and Sam moved in closer to see who was driving the cattle. In the moonlight, Helen could just make out 3 riders pushing the cattle across the boundary onto her land. She recognized one of them from town, one of Jameson's hands. Her heart pounded as she watched Jacob and Sam reveal themselves, rifles raised. "That is far enough," Jacob called out. "You are trespassing on private property." The riders pulled up short, and for a moment everything was balanced on a knife's edge. Then one of them reached for his gun, and several things happened at once. Jacob fired a warning shot into the air. The cattle spooked and scattered. The rider who had been reaching for his gun thought better of it and raised his hands instead. "We do not want trouble," Jacob said, his voice carrying authority. "But we have 3 witnesses to you deliberately driving cattle onto this property. You can turn around and leave now, or you can wait here while we fetch the law." "Jameson is going to hear about this," one of the men snarled. "I am counting on it. Tell him we know what he is doing and we have proof. Tell him if he wants this land, he is going to have to go through proper legal channels, not frame us for rustling." The men left, driving the cattle back the way they came. Jacob, Sam, and Helen gathered to compare notes, making sure they all had the same story. Sam agreed to sign a written statement about what he had witnessed. "That is not the end of it," Sam warned. "Jameson does not like being crossed. You 2 watch your backs." But the next day, before Jameson could make another move, the U.S. Marshal arrived in Columbia a week early. Jacob and Helen were waiting for him, with Sam's statement and their own testimony. The Marshal, a weathered man named Davis, listened carefully. "I will pay Jameson a visit," he said, "but you understand, unless I catch him in the act, it is hard to prove anything. We understand. We just want him to know that we are not going to be pushed around, that we have witnesses and we are not afraid to use legal channels." Marshal Davis nodded. "I will make that clear." Whatever the Marshal said to Jameson must have worked, because the trouble stopped. There were no more mysterious tracks, no more tampered fences. Jameson still glared at them when they passed in town, but he kept his distance. Life on the ranch continued, and as winter came on, Helen and Jacob settled into married life with a comfort that felt like it had always been there. They worked hard during the day and talked late into the night, making plans for the future. Jacob wanted to expand the herd, maybe breed horses as well as cattle. Helen wanted to fix up the house, Add a room for Thomas, who was getting too old to share with them. On Christmas morning, Helen woke to find flowers on her pillow, delicate hothouse blooms that Jacob must have bought in town at considerable expense. "You are spoiling me," she murmured, still half asleep. "That is the idea." He kissed her forehead. "Merry Christmas, wife." They celebrated quietly, just the three of them, with a good meal and simple gifts. Jacob had carved Thomas a wooden horse that was so detailed and beautiful the boy gasped when he saw it. Helen had made Jacob a new shirt from fabric she had been saving for months. And Jacob gave Helen a locket with a tiny photograph inside, a picture of the three of them that had been taken in town by a traveling photographer. "So you always remember," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that you have a family, that you are loved." Helen touched the locket, feeling the weight of it against her heart. "I could not forget if I tried. I hope you never want to try." She kissed him then, long and deep, and when they broke apart, Thomas was making exaggerated gagging sounds that made them both laugh. Winter passed into spring, and Helen realized with wonder that she had been married for almost a year. A year of waking up beside Jacob, of working together, of building something real and lasting. The ranch was thriving in ways it never had when she was alone. They had nearly 70 head of cattle now, and Jacob had bought a breeding pair of horses that were already producing strong foals. In April, Helen started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for a week, she began to suspect the truth. She rode into town to see the doctor, an old man who had known her parents. "Well, Miss Helen," he said with a smile, still using her maiden name out of habit, "you are going to have a baby, I would say about 4 months along." Helen sat in stunned silence. A baby. She and Jacob had not talked about children, had been too focused on keeping the ranch afloat. But now, sitting in the doctor's office with her hand on her still flat stomach, she felt a surge of fierce joy. She rode home in a daze and found Jacob working with one of the horses in the corral. He looked up when she approached, and his smile faded when he saw her expression. "What is wrong? Is it the doctor? Are you sick?" "I am pregnant," she blurted out. "We are going to have a baby." Jacob stared at her, and for a moment she could not read his expression. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen, and he vaulted over the corral fence to sweep her into his arms. "A baby? Really? We are having a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "I know we did not plan this. I know it is going to make everything harder." "Happy? Helen, I am thrilled. I am terrified and amazed and so damn happy I could burst." He set her down carefully, like she was made of glass. "We are going to be parents. You are going to be a mother again, and I am going to be a father." She saw tears in his eyes and felt her own start to fall. "We are really doing this, building a family, a life, all of it." "Yeah, we really are." He kissed her, gentle and reverent. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me, for letting me into your life, for giving me a family." "Thank you for the flowers," she whispered against his lips. "Thank you for making me smile." The pregnancy was not easy. Helen was sick for months, and the summer heat made everything worse. But Jacob was patient and attentive, taking on extra work without complaint, making sure she rested even when she insisted she could still help. Thomas was excited about being a big brother, talking to Helen's growing belly, and telling the baby all about the ranch and the horses and his new friend in town. As her due date approached in November, Helen found herself thinking about her mother, about the day Emma Harris had died, bringing new life into the world. Fear crept in at the edges. Late at night when she could not sleep, Jacob felt her tension one night and pulled her close. "Talk to me. What are you scared of?" "My mother died in childbirth. What if the same thing happens to me?" He was quiet for a moment, and she felt his arms tighten around her. We have the doctor coming to the house this time. We are not going to take any chances. And I am going to be right there with you, holding your hand the whole way. Promise me something. If something happens, if it comes down to a choice, you save the baby. You take care of Thomas and the baby. Nothing is going to happen to you, he said fiercely. But if you are asking me to promise to take care of our children, then yes, I promise, though I do not want to imagine a life without you. I do not want to imagine that either, but I need to know they would be safe. They will be safe, but so will you. You are the strongest person I know, Helen. You have survived things that would have broken most people. You will survive this too. She wanted to believe him, and in the days that followed, she tried to focus on the future rather than her fears. She washed and prepared baby clothes, most of them things Thomas had worn as an infant that she had saved. Jacob built a cradle from pine wood, carving it with a simple flower pattern that made her cry when she saw it. The baby came on a cold November night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Helen woke to sharp pains and knew immediately what was happening. Jacob rode for the doctor in town while Sam Pritchard's wife came to help. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Helen had never known pain like this, sharp and consuming and relentless. But every time she thought she could not bear another moment, she felt Jacob's hand in hers, heard his voice telling her she was strong, she could do this. He was there. When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with a lusty cry, Helen was too exhausted to do more than hold him for a moment before the doctor took him to clean and swaddle. Jacob cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, and then he was beside her, kissing her forehead, telling her how proud he was, how brave she had been. "We have a son," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We have a son, and you are all right. You are both all right." Helen reached up to touch his face, feeling the wetness of his tears. "I told you I would survive. I never doubted you for a second." He looked over at the baby, now cleaned and wrapped, being handed back to Helen by the doctor. "He is perfect. You are both perfect." They named him James, after Jacob's father. Little James Turner had his father's dark hair and his mother's hazel eyes, and from the first moment Helen held him, she felt a love so overwhelming it was almost frightening in its intensity. Thomas was allowed in to meet his new brother, and the boy was gentle and awed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is so small," Thomas whispered. "Will he grow bigger?" "Eventually," Helen said with a tired smile, "but it will take a while. You will have to help teach him things when he is older." "I will teach him everything," Thomas promised seriously. "How to ride and rope and take care of the cattle. I will be the best big brother ever." Jacob ruffled his hair. "I know you will, partner." The first few months with a newborn were exhausting. James needed feeding every few hours, and Helen was constantly tired. But Jacob was amazing, getting up in the night to change diapers and rock the baby when he was fussy, giving Helen time to rest. He still worked the ranch during the day, somehow managing to do the work of 2 people while being a present father and husband. And every morning, without fail, there were flowers. Sometimes just a single bloom, but they were always there, a constant reminder of Jacob's love and devotion. Winter passed into spring, and James grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby who loved being outside and watching the horses. Thomas was a devoted big brother, always wanting to help with the baby. Helen watched her family with a fullness in her heart she had never imagined possible. One morning in May, she woke to find Jacob already up and dressed, standing by the window looking out at the ranch. She went to join him, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How different my life is now from what it was 2 years ago. I was drifting, alone, not sure where I belonged or if I ever would. And then I saw you in town and something told me to stop, to stay, to take a chance. I am glad you did. She rested her cheek against his back. I am glad you left me flowers. I am glad you did not give up when I was cold and suspicious. I am glad you stayed. He turned in her arms, cupping her face in his hands. Do you know what the best part of my day is? Every single day for 2 years now. What? Watching you smile. That first moment when you find the flowers and you smile, like you have a secret that is just ours. I have probably seen you smile 1,000 times by now, and it never gets old. I still feel like the luckiest man alive every time. Helen felt tears prick her eyes, the happy kind that seemed to come so easily now. I love you so much. Sometimes I look at you and I cannot believe this is my life, that I get to have this, have you, have our family. Believe it, because I am not going anywhere. We are going to grow old together on this ranch, watching our kids grow up, maybe having a few more babies if you are willing. A few more, she laughed. One at a time, Cowboy. Let me recover from this one first. He grinned and kissed her, and in the other room they heard James start to fuss and Thomas talking to him in a soothing voice. We should go help, Helen said. In a minute. I want to enjoy this for just a moment longer. You and me, our family, our life. Everything I ever wanted right here. They stood there together, holding each other in the morning light, and Helen thought about how far she had come. From the broken, angry young woman who had been ready to fight the world alone, to this, a woman who knew she was loved, who had built a family and a life with someone who saw her strength and loved her for it. The flowers on the porch that morning were wild roses, the same as the day Jacob had proposed. Helen picked them up and brought them inside, putting them in water on the kitchen table where she could see them while she worked. They would wilt and fade in a few days, but that was all right. There would be more flowers tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, because Jacob Turner kept his promises. Every single one. The years rolled by in a rhythm of seasons and work and love. James learned to walk and then to run, following Thomas everywhere, determined to do everything his big brother did. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They added a room to the house, then another. They built a larger barn and a proper bunkhouse for the occasional help they hired during branding season. When James was 3, Helen found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1886, they welcomed a daughter they named Emma, after Helen's mother. Emma had Jacob's dark hair and a smile that lit up the whole house. Thomas, now 9, and James were both smitten with their little sister, fighting over who got to hold her. Jacob still left flowers every morning, and Helen still smiled every time she found them. It had become a ritual, as much a part of their marriage as the vows they had spoken all those years ago. The flowers were different depending on the season, but they were always there, always fresh, always a reminder that love was not just something you felt, but something you did every single day. When Emma was 2, Helen's worst fear almost came true. Jacob was thrown from a green horse he was breaking, and he hit the ground hard. Helen heard the commotion from the house and ran to find him lying still in the dirt, blood trickling from a cut on his head. For one terrible moment she thought she had lost him. All her old fears came rushing back, the certainty that everyone she loved would leave her. But then he groaned and opened his eyes, and she almost sobbed with relief. The doctor said he had a concussion and needed rest. For a week, Jacob was confined to bed, restless and irritable at being unable to work. Helen took over all his chores on top of her own, working until she was ready to drop, while also caring for 3 children and a stubborn husband. On the 3rd day, she snapped at him when he tried to get out of bed against the doctor's orders. If you do not rest, you are going to make yourself worse, and then who is going to help me run this ranch? Just stay in bed and let yourself heal. I hate being useless, he grumbled. You are not useless. You are healing. There is a difference. She sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. You scared me. When I saw you lying there, I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you. His expression softened and he reached for her hand. I am sorry. I was careless, pushed the horse too fast. It will not happen again. You cannot promise that. Accidents happen, but I need you to be more careful, Jacob. These children need their father. I need you. I need you too, so much. Sometimes I think about what my life would be if I had ridden past Columbia that day, if I had never stopped, and I cannot even imagine it. Everything good in my life started the day I met you. She leaned down and kissed him gently. Then get better. Let me take care of you for once, instead of always being the one who takes care of everyone else. He did get better, slowly, and within a few weeks, he was back to work, though Helen noticed he was more careful now, less willing to take unnecessary risks. The accident had scared them both, reminded them that life was fragile and precious. In 1889, when Emma was 3, they had one more child, another son they named William. With 4 children, the house was always noisy, always full of life. Helen sometimes looked around at her chaotic, beautiful family and could not quite believe it was real. Thomas was 13 now, growing tall and strong, taking on more responsibility on the ranch. He was good with the cattle and even better with the horses, and Jacob talked about maybe sending him to a proper school in Sacramento for a year or 2, to get an education beyond what they could teach him. James was 6, sweet-natured and thoughtful, always bringing Helen rocks he thought were pretty or flowers he picked to match the ones his father left. Emma was a wild child, fearless and stubborn, always covered in dirt and scrapes from climbing things she should not climb. And baby William was just starting to walk, taking wobbly steps between furniture while everyone cheered. The ranch was solidly profitable now. They ran over 100 head of cattle and had a string of horses that were known throughout the county for their quality. Walt Jameson had died 2 years earlier, and his son had sold the ranch and moved to San Francisco. The new owners were decent people who respected property lines and did not cause trouble. Helen was 33 years old, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had been weathered by sun and work but who was happy. Truly, deeply happy. She had laugh lines around her eyes and silver starting in her hair, and she did not mind either one. They were proof of a life well lived, of years spent smiling and loving and being loved in return. One morning in the spring of 1890, Helen woke to find an especially large bouquet of flowers on her porch. Not just wildflowers this time, but roses and lilies and other blooms that must have come from town. She picked them up, puzzled, and carried them inside. Jacob was already up, making coffee. He turned when she entered, and there was a soft smile on his face. "What is this?" she asked. "Did I forget something? Is it our anniversary?" "No." "Well, in a way. It has been 9 years today since I first left flowers on your porch." She set the bouquet down and went to him, sliding her arms around his waist. 9 years of flowers. That is a lot of flowers. And I have enjoyed every single one, enjoyed watching you smile every single time. He kissed the top of her head. "You asked me once why I brought you flowers. Do you remember what I said? To see me smile. And has it worked? Have I seen you smile?" She looked up at him, this man who had changed her entire life with his quiet persistence and steady love. "Every single day. Good. Because I plan to keep bringing you flowers for the rest of our lives, until we are old and gray and our children have children of their own. I will still be bringing you flowers every morning, just to see you smile." Helen felt her eyes grow damp. Even after 9 years, he could still make her cry with his sweetness. "I love you, Jacob Turner. I loved you the day I married you, and I love you more every day that passes. I love you too, Helen, more than I have words for." They stood there in their kitchen, holding each other, while the morning light streamed through the windows and the sounds of their children starting to wake drifted down from upstairs. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary day, but it was also everything. It was the life they had built together, one flower, one smile, one day at a time. Years continued to pass in the rich fullness of a life well lived. Thomas did go to school in Sacramento for 2 years and came back with a head full of knowledge and ideas for improving the ranch. He courted a girl from town, the daughter of the dry goods store owner, and married her in 1895. They built a house on the far end of the property, and Thomas continued working the ranch with Jacob, the two of them partners now rather than mentor and student. James showed an aptitude for working with horses that exceeded even Jacob's skill. He had a way with the animals, a gentleness and patience that made him sought after for breaking and training. People came from all over the county to have James Turner work with their horses. Emma, true to her wild childhood, grew into a strong-willed young woman who ran barrels in local rodeos and who could outride most of the men in the county. She had her mother's fierce independence and her father's steadiness, and Helen knew she would find her own path in her own time. William was the quiet one, more interested in books than cattle, and Helen and Jacob scraped together money to make sure he had access to education. He talked about maybe becoming a teacher someday, or even a lawyer. In 1898, when Helen was 41 and Jacob was 43, they became grandparents when Thomas and his wife had a son. Holding that tiny baby, Helen felt the circle complete. She had gone from an orphan with nothing to a woman with a family so large and loving it sometimes overwhelmed her. The ranch continued to thrive. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, cattle diseases and economic downturns. But they had weathered it all together, Jacob and Helen, partners in every sense of the word. They still worked side by side most days, still talked late into the night about plans and dreams and the simple details of their day. And every single morning, without fail, there were flowers on the porch. Sometimes they were elaborate, other times simple. In the winter, when nothing was blooming, Jacob would buy flowers in town or fashion arrangements from evergreen boughs and dried grasses. But they were always there, always a reminder of that first question Helen had asked all those years ago. Why, to see you smile. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1901, Jacob threw a party that brought together everyone they knew. Friends from town, neighboring ranchers, their children, and the growing number of grandchildren. There was music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Late in the evening, after the children were asleep and the guests were starting to drift home, Jacob pulled Helen out onto the porch. The moon was full, lighting up the California hills in silver. 20 years, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. 20 years married, and I swear I love you more now than I did the day we said our vows. That is because you know me better now, all my flaws and rough edges. I loved your rough edges from the first day. I love that you are strong and stubborn and that you fight for what matters. I love that you smile more easily now, but that your smile still means everything to me. He turned her to face him. I love the life we have built, Helen, every single piece of it. Me too. She touched his face, feeling the lines time had carved there, the silver in his hair. They were both older now, their bodies marked by years of hard work, but to her he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. I cannot imagine my life without you. I do not want to. You will never have to. We made a promise, remember, until we are old and gray. Well, we are getting gray. He grinned. But we have a long way to go yet. They stood on that porch where he had left her flowers for 20 years, holding each other under the moonlight, and Helen thought about how far they had come. From that first morning when she had found a bunch of wildflowers and wondered what stranger had left them, to this, a life so rich and full it sometimes made her breathless. The years continued to pass. Their children grew and married and had children of their own. The ranch expanded as Thomas took on more responsibility, and eventually Jacob began to slow down, content to let the younger generation do more of the physical work while he oversaw and advised. But he never stopped leaving flowers. Even when his hands grew gnarled with arthritis, and it took him longer to gather them, even when he had to walk slower and rest more often, every morning there were flowers on the porch. In 1910, when Helen was 53 and Jacob was 55, they sat together on that same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. There were 7 of them now, ranging from 15 down to 2, and the sound of their laughter filled the air. "We did good," Jacob said, reaching over to take her hand. "We did. Better than I ever dreamed possible. Do you ever think about that first morning, when you found the flowers and came to the barn to yell at me?" Helen laughed. "I was not yelling. I was inquiring forcefully. You were ready to brain me with a fence post the day before. I figured yelling was a step up. I was suspicious of you. I had been alone for so long I had forgotten how to let anyone in. And now," she squeezed his hand, "now I cannot imagine being alone again. You have been part of me for so long, Jacob. The best part." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together. In the house behind them, Helen knew there were flowers in at least 4 different rooms, some fresh from that morning, others pressed and framed, memories of special days. She thought about all those mornings, all those flowers, all those smiles. Thousands of them over nearly 30 years. It seemed impossible that it had been that long, and yet also like no time at all. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the flowers. For making me smile, for staying, for keeping every promise you ever made to me." She turned to look at him. "For loving me when I had forgotten how to be loved." His eyes were damp, and he leaned over to kiss her, soft and sweet. "It was never a burden, Helen. Loving you has been the greatest joy of my life." As the sun dipped below the hills and the children were called in for supper, Jacob and Helen sat together on the porch, hand in hand, exactly where they belonged. Where they had always belonged. Together. The morning Jacob Turner died, Helen woke to find flowers on her pillow beside her. He had died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. His hand still holding hers. The flowers were wildflowers, just like the ones he had left that very first morning, Indian paintbrush and lupine and California poppies. Helen held those flowers while she cried, while her children and grandchildren gathered, while they made arrangements and said goodbye. She carried them to the funeral and laid them on his grave beside the simple headstone they had chosen together years before. Jacob Turner. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. He brought her flowers and made her smile. Helen lived for another 8 years after Jacob's death, and though she missed him every single day, she found joy in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She watched the ranch continue to thrive under Thomas's management, watched James's reputation as a horseman spread throughout California, watched Emmer run for town council and win, watched William open a law practice in Sacramento. She told them stories about their father, about the man who had ridden onto a failing ranch and saved it with hard work and love, about the flowers he had left every morning for 46 years, never missing a single day until the day he died. And every morning, even though Jacob was gone, Helen would wake and for just a moment expect to see flowers on her nightstand. And then she would remember, and the grief would wash over her fresh and sharp. But along with the grief came gratitude, a bone-deep thankfulness that she had been loved so well, so completely, for so many years. On the morning of her 73rd birthday, Helen's children threw her a party. The house was full of family. 3 generations gathered to celebrate. After the cake was eaten and the presents opened, Thomas brought out a large wooden box. "We found this in the barn," he said. "Hidden in the back. There is a note that says to give it to you on your birthday." With shaking hands, Helen opened the box. Inside were bundles and bundles of dried flowers, carefully preserved and labeled with dates. 46 years of flowers, nearly every one Jacob had ever given her, saved and stored. And on top was a letter in Jacob's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am so sorry. Sorry to leave you, sorry to break my promise to bring you flowers every morning. But I wanted you to have these, proof of every day I loved you. Every morning I woke up grateful to have you in my life. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in Colombia, covered in dust and ready to fight the world. I loved you the day I left you those first flowers. I loved you the day you asked me why, and I loved the sound of my answer, to see you smile. I have seen you smile thousands of times over the years. I have watched you smile at our children, at our grandchildren, at me. Every single smile has been a gift, a reminder that I made the right choice to stay, to fight for you, to love you with everything I had. I hope you will keep smiling, my love. Smile at the life we built, at the family we raised, at the memories we made. Smile because you are loved, not just by me, but by every person whose life you have touched. I will be waiting for you whenever you are ready. And when you arrive, I will have flowers for you. The most beautiful flowers in heaven, just to see you smile one more time. All my love, forever and always." Jacob. Helen read the letter through tears. Her children gathered around her. When she finished, she looked up at their worried faces and smiled. Really smiled the way Jacob had always loved. "Your father," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father was the best man I ever knew, and I am the luckiest woman who ever lived because he loved me. He loved all of us." She kept the letter with her always after that, along with one bundle of the dried flowers. The rest she gave to her children and grandchildren, pieces of the love story that had shaped all their lives. Helen Harris Turner died peacefully in her sleep on a warm June night in 1926, surrounded by family. She was 73 years old, and her last words were about the flowers, about the man who had loved her enough to bring them every single morning for 46 years. They buried her beside Jacob, and on her grave, her children planted wildflowers. Indian paintbrush and lupine and California poppies, the same flowers Jacob had left that very first morning. The same flowers that had made her ask why, that had led to the answer that changed everything. To see you smile. And if you visit that quiet cemetery outside Columbia, California, even now, you will find those wildflowers blooming every spring. A testament to a love that started with a simple gesture, a daily promise kept through decades, through children and grandchildren, through joy and sorrow, through every season of a life built together. A cowboy gave her wildflowers every morning. She asked why. He said to see her smile. And for 46 years, she smiled for him, every single day until the day he died. And in the years after, she smiled at the memory of him, at the life they had built, at the proof that true love was not just something you felt, but something you did, every single day, with flowers and promises and a devotion that lasted beyond death itself. Their story became legend in Colombia, passed down through generations. The love story of Jacob and Helen Turner, The cowboy and the woman who had been too broken to believe in love until he showed her, one flower at a time, that she deserved to smile, that she deserved to be happy, that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. Not the flowers themselves, but what they represented. A man who saw a woman fighting alone and decided to stand beside her. A man who understood that love was not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day and meaning it. A man who knew that sometimes the simplest question had the most powerful answer. Why? To see you smile.